Millions of Americans will be receiving eviction notices over the next few weeks. This coincides with the perfect economic storm. These clouds are converging, and it's going to create a financial deluge on our country. Now we're going to talk about that. I'm also going to share something with you that will give you insight into why I am so passionate about financial independence. Okay. Also, if you stick with this to the end, I'm going to share with you the number one way for you to make sure that you don't fall into this same trap. Okay. So stick with this to the end. Let's get started.
Pretty much screwed. I have no plan. They gave me 3 weeks. They wanted to give me 6 days to get out. They gave me 3 weeks because I begged for it. And in 3 weeks, I have no idea where I'm going to go or what I'm going to do. I was backed up 4 months, and I ended up talking to my landlord, telling him the situation with my medical, and trying to see if he would work with me, and he didn't want to hear it. He's like, why am I going to wait for your rent when I can get somebody else moving in here? So he's throwing me out to get somebody else in so he can get his money, which I kind of agree with the guy. He needs to make his money too, but you got to work with people. Everybody's having hardships right now. Everybody needs a little bit of help from somebody. The money, it's way too expensive. Rent prices are outrageous. I was paying $900, and that's for one little tiny bedroom. I've looked for other apartments. I can't afford them. There's no way by myself I can afford what the rents are right now. It's outrageous out here.
This is just the attitude.
He has a judgment against him for, I think it was $5,200 of unpaid rent. And that amount is now a judgment which is good for 20 years and technically accrues interest at 1% a month. More important, probably, it's public record on the court system and obviously will have arguably some effect on his ability to rent an apartment and to get any other kind of credit going forward.
3 weeks when they want to lease.
There comes a point where landlords will simply say, for example, if I were to take rent relief money now, I'm just going to be back here next month because the person has no more ability to pay in August or September or October or November or whatever than they do now when it's time to just make it end.
Okay, what is this perfect economic storm? Okay, you've seen what we're looking at in terms of the eviction moratorium ending. We've also got the foreclosure moratorium ending. We've got the end of federally subsidized unemployment benefits, and all of this is occurring in an inflationary environment. Inflation is running at about 5%, but don't let that fool you. Look, here's the trick that they don't tell you on the evening news. If we counted inflation the way we did in the 1980s by including food and energy, inflation would be north of 13%, okay? And it's ludicrous for them to have excluded those two metrics because you're at the grocery store and or the gas station several times a week. Those are probably the prices that you feel the highest impact from. It's putting gas in your tank and food in your family's stomach. Okay, so absolutely insane that they're out there trying to tell us that we're only at 5% inflation when in fact we're up closer to 14%. And so that's what I mean by the perfect economic storm. We're looking at millions of Americans. Remember, we're also dealing with the fact that we're not back at pre-pandemic employment levels either. Now, I know a lot of people have been parroting this trope about, well, I drive down the street and Burger King and KFC and McDonald's and they're all hiring. Great, whoop-de-doo. If you had a job making $60,000 and now McDonald's is hiring, going to work there is not even going to really prolong the inevitable. And by the inevitable, I mean foreclosure, insolvency, maybe bankruptcy, and repossession. Okay, there's no way you're getting paid $15 an hour and being able to support the $60,000 lifestyle you had when prior to 2020, the events of 2020. So that's a ludicrous argument. All right, we're still looking at, even if people did take those jobs, they're not going to be able to stave off those financial obligations that they have. And so you could conceivably see an increase in foreclosure, repossession, and bankruptcy. And remember, okay, here's something that's important to remember. All of this is caused by these craven politicians who care nothing about you but care deeply about their own ambition. That's all they care about. Now, sure, I'm not going to paint with a broad brush, but look, most politicians that I've known and that I know of today fit the description that I just gave. Now, let's take a look at this article from Mish Talk. At least 12 million face eviction as moratorium ends. Now, we're going to look at this based to look at some of the stats. This was published prior to the eviction moratorium expiring, but the data is still valid. I'm going to share these charts with you too. Look at this one. Confidence in ability to pay rent. And if you look at that, we've got almost 5 million people that say they have no confidence that they'll be able to pay the rent. And then we've got close to 8 million who say they have slight confidence. This is a danger zone for a lot of people. I mean, millions of people. And you could say what you want in terms of, yeah, well, they should have saved the money. I don't know how you get water from a rock. And sure, there were some people gaming the system. That's true in any situation. But I don't think that 12 million people were gaming the system. I think what happened is you saw the rise in unemployment during the spring and summer of 2020. And so correspondingly, it makes absolute sense that since people didn't have jobs, they were placed in a situation where they were not able to meet their financial obligations. State and local governments have struggled to distribute $47 billion in federal money aimed at helping tenants who can't pay rent because of the situation in 2020, leaving many people at risk of being forced out of their homes when the moratorium expires. Now, let me say this. It is absolutely inexcusable for these states to have mismanaged the flow of this money, $47 billion, taxpayer money, that's been allocated to help relieve these rents in arrears. It's an absolute disgrace that these states have not been able to manage this efficiently when lives are actually in the balance. You get a lot of people out here crowing about, the illness. What do you think would happen? Don't you think that homelessness would compound the effects of that? Okay, if people are having to resort to living on the streets or in crowded shelters or with family members, okay? But again, these politicians, they're not out for you, they're out for themselves. Just $3 billion of the aid authorized by Congress in December and March have been delivered to landlords and tenants as of June 30th, the Treasury Department said in a report last week. Meanwhile, many landlords have been squeezed because they have been unable to collect rent but remain on the hook for taxes, maintenance, and other bills. So you see how it's hitting them. And guess what? The renters who can't pay that rent, as you saw in that clip, guess what? They're going to be impacted from the standpoint of their credit and their credit rating, okay? It's going to be almost impossible for a lot of these people to get into another rental situation in the short term because they are getting gigged because they didn't pay the rent, okay? And in rent court, it is extremely difficult. I mean, when you go into rent court and the landlord brings a case that you didn't pay the rent, there is no recourse, okay? Hey, did you pay it? No, I didn't. You didn't pay it? Don't have any receipts? No, I don't. Okay, judgment in favor of the plaintiff or the landlord in this case. So this is what we're dealing with, okay? Let's continue on. The moratorium was originally set to expire December 31st, 2020. So we've had this thing going for 6 more months. That's all Congress and these states know how to do is kick the can down the road, okay, and try to figure out how to pawn it off and excuse it on other people. Every politician in office should be ashamed of themselves that this situation is going on in this country today. In June, The Supreme Court rejected an emergency request to clear the way for evictions after the Biden administration said it would extend the moratorium for one final month. Justice Brett Kavanaugh voted with the 5-4 majority to keep the moratorium in place. However, he issued a one-paragraph concurrence saying he believed the moratorium was unlawful. Isn't that something? He believed it was unlawful, but he ruled the other way, okay? These guys, you just can't make this stuff up. Okay, so we saw what the tenants, what their viewpoint is in terms of their confidence around being able to pay their rent. And now let's take a look at the property owners or the landlords' confidence in their ability to pay the mortgage. As we can see here, we got close to 3 million who say they have no confidence that they'll be able to pay their mortgage. And then we have another almost 6 million that say they have a slight confidence that they'll be able to pay their mortgage. So we're looking at 9 million landlords, 9 million property owners who say that their best case scenarios, they have the slight confidence that they'll be able to pay their mortgage. So that's 9 million potential foreclosures. So to give that some comparison, between 2008 and 2009, the country saw a total of just over 5 million foreclosures. All right. So this is what we're looking at, the perfect economic storm. Let me share something with you real quick. In terms of homelessness, I know how that feels. I was homeless when I was in college. And look, I was working at the time and going to school. Okay, I actually had 2 jobs. I was a legislative assistant for the state of Maryland, and I had a job at my college with the Office of Student Activities. And I couldn't afford a place to live. Now, in my situation, I had not lost a mortgage. I had not defaulted on a mortgage. I was a young man. Okay, I didn't have anything. So it was summertime. I remember that. So that made it a lot easier. I didn't have to, in wintertime, you must find a place to shelter. In the summertime, some nights I hung out with friends. But most of the time what I would do is I had keys to our district legislative office. And I would go there and I would just sleep in a chair. It was the most uncomfortable sleep I've ever had, but it was safe. It was, climate controlled and all that good stuff. As far as, facilities and things like that, of course, we had that at the office. And then it was during the summertime, I was taking classes. And what I would do is I would swim a lot. Okay. I had a friend in the campus police who would open up the pool for me during off hours, and I would have the whole Olympic-sized swimming pool to myself, and it was great. But I have experienced homelessness, and I don't want people to have to go through that, even though my situation was not nearly as dire as many people. That's one of the formative experiences that I went through that let me know that, I need financial independence in my life. I definitely do not want to experience that again as an older individual, okay? I'm not 20 years old anymore. So I don't want to see this happen to anybody. And the government caused this situation. Let's be clear about that. The government decided to shut down the states. They decided to shut down the economies of the states. Again, our governor here, old Larry Hogan, he's not going to be homeless. He just bought a $1.1 million house. So, how worried is he about this? Okay, so this is why, and I told you if you stayed until the end, I was going to give you the number one way to prevent this from happening to you, but I'm going to give you 2. The number one way to prevent this from happening to you is not to ever trust what a politician says, okay? Because politicians create the situation with no real understanding of how to land the plane, okay? So don't trust politicians. Number 2, as I always say, and I don't care if I sound like a broken record, you got to stack assets. You have to acquire assets. Oh, but I can't buy stocks because they're so expensive. Every stock in the S&P 500 is available at a fractional share, depending upon what I think Charles Schwab offers that, as do many of the other online brokerages, okay? So there is no excuse for you not to be able to start doing your due diligence and finding assets, whether they be real estate, whether they be stocks, whether it be a business of your own, whether you talk with your family members and maybe you guys got a plot of land somewhere in a different state. going ahead and doing what's necessary to bring that back up to speed and using it as a retreat, a compound in case things get really dicey here in America, which I believe they will. Okay, and putting your resources into something like that so that you can make sure your family, is able to weather this perfect storm. Okay, guys, that's all for now. I'll talk to you soon.